Hey, what's up guys, aarava here, and welcome back to a brand new video, and welcome to the return of talking about real-life Formula 1 on this channel. It's been a hot minute, you know, obviously the season is on hold, so there's not been a lot of need for any of these kind of videos talking about the real-life sport, because there is no real-life sport as it stands at the moment. But of course, if you were not living under a rock this week in the world of Formula 1, you know that things have shaken up quite a fair bit. We've had Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari confirming their parting ways at the end of the 2020 season, and earlier today we got the confirmation of what we kind of already saw coming after the Vettel announcement, that Carlos Sainz will be signed to Ferrari after 2020, and then also Daniel RIcciardo will be jumping ship from Renault and going to McLaren also at the end of 2020. So three really exciting developments in Formula 1, and still maybe some more to come, because we don't know what's going to be occurring with Sebastian Vettel. Will he retire? Will he go to a different team? And then of course Renault still have a seat to fill, and there's always still question marks about some other seats around here, but mainly we're going to talk about these three. We're going to kind of do it in reverse order here today, so I'm going to start off talking about the Carlos Sainz move to Ferrari, then go to Ricciardo, and then end it off with Sebastian Vettel. But hopefully you guys enjoy the return to talking about real-life Formula 1. I know the hype on the channel currently from yesterday is all about the F1 2020 game, but obviously if you do know, if you were with me on the channel earlier on in the year, I was hoping to have a lot of real-life based content on the channel with your F1 comments. Obviously the Grand Prix aren't happening, so your F1 comments can't happen, but at least we can return to talking about the real sport for just a little while here with these major bits of the kind of F1 silly season coming in to fruition, and obviously when the real life season does kick off eventually, I guess, I hope, then we will be bringing back that kind of content, of course. So let's dive into it, and first of all, kick things off with Carlos Sainz to Ferrari. So first and foremost, personally for me, I am really excited about the news of Carlos Sainz going to Ferrari. Some maybe not if you're a massive McLaren fan, or are worried maybe about Sainz's long-term career, I guess, but in terms of context, I don't really support any one driver anymore in Formula 1. I used to support Jenson Button as like a die-hard fan, and ever since he retired, I don't really support anyone the same way. I have like a couple of drivers who I like to see do well in races, of course, and kind of have a soft spot for, and one of them is definitely Carlos Sainz. So to see him in a top team now, or going to a top team rather, after 2020, because of course he's still got a contract with McLaren for the rest of the season, and he stated that he's still excited to obviously hit the ground running with Lando Norris alongside him for that 2020 season, whenever that occurs, obviously, in whatever manner it occurs, he's ready for that. But after that, I'm really excited to see him go to Ferrari. In terms of let's talk about and analyze that decision, you don't really say no to going to Ferrari, I don't think. I think Ferrari come knocking on your door, you don't really say no to that unless you're in a team that is dominating the season already. So if Lewis Hamilton was at Mercedes, and there's been so much speculation, will Hamilton ever go to Ferrari? But if Ferrari come knocking at Hamilton's door, but Hamilton's already got such a great seat at Mercedes, it's very hard to see how he would say yes. But when you're a driver like Sainz, you're in the team like McLaren, who obviously used to be a top team, now they're sort of a midfield team looking to rebuild themselves back to a top team, you don't really say no to an offer from the most famous team in Formula 1, really. And I think for him, obviously there'll be question marks in terms of, you know, he bought into the McLaren long-term project, and after a year, he's jumped ship from that project. But to be honest, in my opinion, I think Sainz has deserved to have the ability to do that. I think Sainz has earned the right to do that at least once in his career, because he's been messed around a lot. He got rejected from the Red Bull Driver Academy, and obviously had that very annoying situation where he had to himself forge a loan deal to Renault, which then ended up as a full-time seat deal. But then, when he was at Renault, he basically got told there's no room for him anymore when they wanted to sign Daniel RIcciardo, so he got kind of ousted twice from two different families of F1. So I think because he's come back from that, he's shown grit, he's earned the right to at least once be like, okay, you know what, I bought into this long-term project from McLaren, and now Ferrari come knocking, I am going to jump ship. You know, the sport's been so harsh to me, I deserve to be harsh a little bit. And to be fair, he's not being harsh. I think he's gone about it in the right way, respectful to McLaren, of course. And in terms of him going to Ferrari, like I was about to say, I think personally it's a great fit. For Ferrari, you can definitely say their long-term bet is Charles Leclerc. He is their #1 long-term bet for world championships in the future. So I think Sainz already knows that as well. So it's not necessarily going to be going there for a #1 driver, and not necessarily even maybe equal driver, maybe just under equal. recall, but at the same time, it's going to be hopefully a race-winning car for them in the future. Obviously, we don't know about 2020. It didn't seem that great at the start of pre-season testing, but in the future, when Sainz goes there, they're hoping that they can obviously provide their drivers Leclerc and Sainz with a race-winning car. So for Sainz, obviously, yet to win a race. He's been on the podium now at Brazilian Grand Prix last year. For him, it's a great choice, I think, in terms of, living out that dream of being in a top team. He's got the speed, in my opinion. He only narrowly got beaten by Verstappen in the same car in Toro Rosso over the course of the year. In qualifying, he comfortably beat Daniel RIcciardo. And over the course of this season, last year in McLaren, he showed that he definitely had the better race pace than Lando Norris. In qualifying, Norris was there, but in race pace terms, Sainz always had it. He was so consistent, and he was such a great point scorer, obviously getting that P6 and helping McLaren get P4 in the championship. So I think it's a good fit, and like I mentioned also, he has the grit that you need in Formula 1 to survive and, take the pressure of being in Ferrari. He's had the pressure of being ousted from Red Bull, the pressure of being ousted from Renault, and he's come back from that and rebuilt his entire career, essentially, from what was, being killed off by the Red Bull program, forged that deal with Renault, like I mentioned, and come back. So I think he's got the pressure. I think he can handle the pressure that obviously comes with being a Ferrari driver. Also, off the track, he speaks Italian fluently. He's well media trained, and I think he would work well with Leclerc. I think we've already seen some signs of him and Leclerc having some banter. In general, we've seen Sainz has come out of his shell a little bit. Norris helped bring him out a little bit more in terms of that kind of actually showing he has some good banter and just generally is a fun kind of person to be around in terms of PR-wise. So I think that would work well with Leclerc, who obviously we know is already well, suited in that department. So as a PR thing, that's really decent for Ferrari as well. And finally, Ferrari have said it's a long road for them to get back to the front. They've admitted that it still will be a while for them to really get to the front where they're hoping to get. And so the long-term plan, I think it suits to have a driver like Sainz who could push Leclerc a little bit as well. Because in my opinion, I think Sainz will push Leclerc. In many ways, we'll have to see how it pans out. But in my opinion, I think almost Ferrari might have bought in to more than they're actually looking to get. Because I think Sainz could challenge Leclerc decently. Maybe not over the course of an entire season, but I think there will be moments where Ferrari will be tested in terms of that kind of headache and grinding between Leclerc and Sainz butting heads like Vettel and Leclerc did. But I think Sainz, even more than Vettel in a way, has the potential to do that more consistently because, like I said, he's been so consistent in the McLaren in race situations and has kept a level head throughout different kind of scenarios at McLaren. So in many ways, I think also in a way, Ferrari will have a headache in some kind of sense. Sainz has a 2+1 year deal as well, so that shows Ferrari's kind of commitment to having that kind of longevity, at least for 3 years minimum, of that plan and that pairing of Leclerc and Sainz, which is also, by the way, the youngest Ferrari pairing in about 50 years, I think. So that's also very exciting for us as a sport, to see Ferrari putting their faith in youngsters now, and it's kind of a new era of Ferrari, I guess, rebranding themselves, reworking themselves for the future. Now, moving on to Daniel RIcciardo, I think this will be a fan favorite move. I think already the kind of potential having Ricciardo and Norris have a lot of banter. It's a PR dream, really, actually, for McLaren, if you think about it. I think McLaren fans are going to go absolutely nuts, even more so than the bromance that did blossom between Sainz and Norris. I think one between Norris and Ricciardo will go even better. I mean, we saw that moment in the press conference where Ricciardo was joking about Lando Norris unable to grow some hair down there, and that was quite a funny moment. So I think already glimpses of that partnership being a decent one in terms of off track, but also on track. Ricciardo is no slouch. I think, he's a race winner, of course, so I think that's going to be experience that will be well met at McLaren. Norris can learn some stuff from Ricciardo, and I also think Norris will push Ricciardo way more than Hülkenberg ever did and could to Ricciardo in that same seat. So I think it's also not a sideways step for Ricciardo, like many are saying, because obviously right now it's a midfield team for a midfield team, Renault to McLaren, but I genuinely don't think it's a sideways step. You've got to look at it at 2021, it's not going to be McLaren Renault anymore, it's going to be McLaren Mercedes, and so already, just with the Mercedes engine, it's an upward step in terms of Ricciardo getting back to fighting at the top of Formula 1. Also, you've got to take into account already McLaren's aero and chassis is superior to Renault, so it's definitely an upwards move for Ricciardo. In terms of does that get him to the top of Formula 1, of course, now Ricciardo's the one buying into McLaren's long-term project of rebuilding. We have seen, though, McLaren did turn the corner in 2019, so the foundations are there. It's just about, seeing the roadmap through now, and hopefully McLaren make their way through the new 2022 regulations, as it will be, because obviously they've delayed the regulation changes from 1 year, from 2021 to 2022. So it's now about getting through that transition and hoping McLaren hit the ground running in that era of Formula One, basically, and Ricciardo was there for the ride. But for Ricciardo, you know, Renault showed no massive signs of breakthroughs, basically. So for him, it was basically a case of, right, I've collected my bag, I've collected my 20 million a year or whatever, so he's got a great check, and now I'm going to a team that actually has some potential. Because honestly, and I may be being quite harsh to Renault, I'm not trying to be, you know, I don't have anything against Renault, but they really haven't shown any sign to Ricciardo that they're going to be a top team anytime soon, and that's what Ricciardo wanted. Ricciardo is getting towards, I guess, the back end of his career, I would say. So for Ricciardo's sake, he needs to see that there's going to be, you know, soon, hopefully, the potential for even just a podium. I mean, Renault couldn't even give him that. To me personally, it's a cool move. It's going to be cool to see Ricciardo and Norris together. I will admit, though, when the rumours were coming about that maybe a Vettel-McLaren deal could be on the table, that really whet my appetite to see McLaren partner up with Vettel, because I think in terms of just driver caliber, obviously, I think for me, Vettel would take it over Ricciardo. And then finally, we come to Sebastian Vettel, the news that he will be parting ways with Ferrari. It's really sad to really kind of see this happen, because I think a lot of the signs are pointing to Vettel potentially retiring out of Formula One, which will be a shame. He's a great character as a person. He's great. You can clearly see that in interviews, and I think he's still got some unfinished business as a driver, and it's a real shame the whole Ferrari Vettel kind of renaissance idea did not pay off. It had all the foundations for it, but in the end, Ferrari didn't deliver, and also Vettel didn't deliver in some aspects as well. It's not about the money, though, for Sebastian Vettel. I think that's been said many, many times in terms of they couldn't come to agreement. The statement from Vettel, the way it was worded from Sebastian's mouth, I think, to be honest, this entire situation we're in, I think, honestly, Vettel sat down and kind of had more time with his wife and kids, and kind of just maybe in his mind realised, you know what, I've had a good run, I've had 4 championships in F1, I'm now cemented in F1 history, there's no argument in that. Vettel is going to go down as one of the greats in the sport, because he's a 4-time bloody world champion, and so sitting down, maybe having more quality time with his family, he is very much family orientated, I would say, because he's a very private person, so I think he maybe just realised, you know what, maybe I've fallen out of love a little bit with the sport, maybe driving, maybe it's just time to give it a rest and, enjoy my family life, go into his passions of, restoring motorbikes and whatnot and classic cars. And I think it would be a decent fit for Sebastian Vettel. I think he could have a very happy life. I think he could also contribute to F1. I think he could do many ambassadorial roles and also roles within the sport itself to help the sport out even further. But if he didn't want to, I think, he can call it a day and be proud of what he's achieved in the sport, of course. It would be a shame, though. Like with Carlos Sainz and I would say Leclerc and Pierre Gasly, I do have a soft spot for Sebastian Vettel as a driver. I used to be maybe a little bit half and half with him when he used to be at Red Bull in the first 2 years, but then he started to open up his shell a little bit in 2012 and 2013, and I really grew to like him as a person, as a personality, and as a driver. And then at Ferrari, he opened up even more and kind of tapped into his motions even more, maybe to his detriment in a way, because the red mist has descended a few times with Sebastian, so maybe he got in tune with his emotions and the driving a little bit too much at Ferrari, but it really did make me appreciate him a lot more. And so it would be a shame for me to see him go, but at the same time, I think he can be proud if he did close the book on F1. In terms of if he was to go to a different team and then looking back at his era at Ferrari, again, I don't think you can fault him at Ferrari. He's the 3rd most successful Ferrari driver in an era where Mercedes were dominating the entire time. So I think he's done himself proud at Ferrari as well. Yes, he's had mistakes. Yes, in certain aspects, he's become a little bit of a meme to some parts of the F1 community, but as much as maybe I've made the same jokes, at the end of the day, stripping back all the jokes, I do really rate him and I do really respect him, and I think he can be very proud of what he's done at Ferrari. So it's a bit of a shame to see it go this way, but I think you can see it's kind of mutual thing of Ferrari also being like, we don't really want to give him a long-term thing because our long-term now is with Leclerc, and that's why they've got Sainz in. Sainz is never going to be equal pegging with Leclerc, I don't think, but Sainz will be a bit more accepting of that just underneath number 1 role than Vettel ever could, I think. In terms of potential moves left for Sebastian Vettel without retirement, obviously everyone's saying Mercedes just because of that mouth-watering thing of Hamilton v Vettel. I don't see it will ever happen unless Mercedes are smoking some really good stuff. I don't think it's going to happen. Where does that leave him? Maybe Renault, but like I just said, with Ricciardo, the reason why Ricciardo is leaving is Renault are leaving no evidence that there will be a top team. And a driver like Vettel, and he said in interviews that, you know, when you're at the top for so long, you get used to being at the top. So you don't want to drive for a P6 in a race anymore. So, you know, for him, I think he wants a race-winning car, and Renault aren't going to give him that. So the only other left-field option would be Aston Martin. Maybe. Obviously, though, Stroll's there. He's solidified in that role. Would Racing Point / Aston Martin for 2021 oust Perez, who's been such a loyal driver for them over these years? Would they oust him for Sebastian Vettel? Don't know, but it's the only other third kind of likely option maybe that I can think of in terms of Aston Martin, a backing Racing Point. You've got all this money from the Stroll family. They're going to try and challenge the top guys. I do think that Aston Martin as a team within the next 3-4 years will be, you know, on the cusp. We've seen it already with the Racing Point of 2020, a Mercedes copy. The testing times look so good. I know you can't read into testing, but it looked very, very good. So the Aston Martin project would be the only other project I see on the grid for Vettel to go to that would make some sort of sense apart from Mercedes and that kind of pipe dream of versing Hamilton. So, yeah. In terms of all that, I think it's likely he retires from Formula 1. And to be honest, I think he can be, like I said, happy about that and proud of what he's achieved. And just let the man enjoy his family life, enjoy his life, and have a good one, basically. That's kind of been then my analysis and look into these 3 driver transfers and changes in Formula 1 and my slight opinion on those. Obviously, let me know your guys' opinions in the comments below about Carlos Sainz to Ferrari, Ricciardo to McLaren, and Vettel obviously leaving Ferrari and either maybe retiring or going somewhere else. Where do you think you'll go? Do you think Ricciardo's move to McLaren is a decent one? What about Sainz to Ferrari? Let me know all that good stuff. And what do you make of other drivers that I haven't mentioned yet who are maybe in the mix for the Renault seat or maybe other seats around Formula 1, basically? Because there obviously are a few names knocking about now because Renault now have to find a driver. One of the names has been Fernando Alonso, as is always the case in Formula 1. You can never get rid of Fernando Alonso's name because he's still not really, you know, out of it, essentially. He's still clearly got some racing in him, so that's come into it. But I don't know. At this point, I'm not going to comment on anything Alonso because it's just way too much speculation. The man wins the prize for the best shithousery ever. He tweeted Renault F1 with a picture of Renault fans back in the day when he used to drive for Renault, just stirring the pot even more. He just loves to do that, so he's a great character in that kind of way. But it's all a bit too much. So I'm not gonna speculate and kind of go into the rumors. You guys can kind of let me know in the comments below what you make of that. But if you did enjoy the video and also like the return of talking about real life Formula 1 on the channel, then be sure to smash that like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you're new around here, then do get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content. Obviously, right now it's mostly F1 gaming, but as maybe more juicy real life Formula 1 news comes into play, I will be making more videos like this. Of course, like I said, I did want to start doing a lot of real life F1 based content with your F1 comments, but obviously we didn't get any Grand Prix, so until then that's going to be put on pause. But that is also one thing I want to state for any of you guys who are wondering when the season, if it does ever return this year, I will be bringing back your F1 comments, that kind of, you know, pilot series I did for preseason testing. The pilots went well. You guys seem to really enjoy that, so I am looking forward to actually doing that properly when the season begins. So for now, yeah, that's been the news. If any more comes out, if any more juicy news comes out, I'll make a video on it. But I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the day. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.